we are so happy to have you here this morning for the last Preserving New Orleans Future Talk for 2023. It's been a wonderful year. We've had some incredible speakers, and we're really ending it with a bang here with Alston Taylor, who is the president of St. Aug, and we are very, very blessed to call him the vice president of the Preservation Resource Center. He's going to be our board chair next year, and he has just made such an incredible impact here in New Orleans as a native New Orleanian who left, did incredible things in New York and elsewhere, decided to come back. We're so lucky that he is here in New Orleans, and he is going to share some of his philosophy behind how to train the next generation of leaders who can make an impact in our city. So I'm very excited to hear what he has to say. I know you all are as well. And he's invited some other speakers to share perspectives as well. So you're going to have a wonderful hour ahead of you. I just want to give a little heads up to you guys that we are continuing this series into 2024. Why? Well, because sadly in the year 2023, all of New Orleans' problems weren't solved. There are still plenty to go around. And so we still need inspiration. We still need to be reminded of all the great things that are happening in the city, great people doing stuff that might go under the radar or might not get big headlines because it's not as sexy as murders or floods or whatever, saltwater or anything. So that's the whole point of this, is to bring to light the wonderful things and wonderful people doing incredible things in our city. And so we've had a fun time doing that this year. On January 19th, Walt Leger, who's the head of New Orleans and Company, will be speaking about the continued important impact of tourism in New Orleans, so we hope you can join us for that. In the meantime, we have a lot of holidays and revelry ahead of us, so thank you for being here this morning. If you're not already a member of the Preservation Resource Center, I encourage you to join. Join us for our holiday home tour, December 9th and 10th. We have a lot going on, so I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed speaker, Alston Taylor. Thank you, Alston.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you guys for being here with us. We know it's early, but it's early risers always get the bird, get the word, and so we're here. So thank you for being here. I want to acknowledge board members from PRC that are in the room. If you're here, raise your hand. Don't shy. Good to see you. Good to see. What's Chris? Oh, Chris, right. Thank you guys, the staffers. We have about 15 on staff now. So thank you guys for the work that you do every day and the guidance that we give as board members. I want to share with you the work that happens at PRC that many people may not know about. From March to about December, there are about 4 to 5 different signature events that's taking place, from holiday home tour to our gala, which this year is going to be celebrating our 50th anniversary in 2024. And we move into the timing of March, which is when we have our spring holiday home tour. And I'm encouraging you guys, if you have not experienced any of the tours from the holiday home tour to the spring home tour, you should. It is an amazing time to get out, see homes, see the quality of the work that's happening in a lot of historic properties in the city of New Orleans. And then from August through September and ongoing, we have educational programming. Programming that is to support families, to help them with maintenance, to be able to keep their historic properties alive and well. Now, an area you may not know about is revival grants. The revival grant program is centered around helping low-income homeowners to be able to provide support to the exterior of their homes. And this work has been happening since 2019. So over the last 4 to 5 years, there's been numerous families that have seen the support with grant making that PRC is doing to make sure that they can keep their properties. Come on in. And then lastly, Armstrong Park. It's a crown jewel in the neighborhood of Treme, where I was blessed to grow up in. PRC has a historic property that we have made an investment in to say, we're going to be the consultant on this property to make sure that it comes back to life. So I share all that to say, Danielle said it earlier, that join us, become members at a minimum it costs you as an investment of $50. $50, you join, and you give that support. Those dollars go toward the operating fund that we operate at about 1.5. And so doing that good work that we've been doing, we need your support to do it. So let's move into hope. The hope for the next generation for the city of New Orleans. So oddly enough, today I have a funeral to attend for an uncle of mine who is my grandmother's, my grandmother's brother-in-law. And so I bring him up because in the mid-60s, he bought a home at 2022 Barrett Street. And it was a shotgun double. And he purchased that home for the sole reason, in fact, that at that time, a black man was eligible to vote only if he had home ownership. And so his hope to vote at that time was through the purchase of a property. Well, he bought that property in the 60s. And then in 1997, he sold that property to my mom. And in 1997, when my mom bought that home for $41,000. Hey, I share that. She kept it for 15 years. In 1997, I was a junior at St. Aug. I lived in that home my junior year, my senior year. And then 15 years later, my mom kind of gave that house to me. But it had 20 grand of debt on it, but she gave that home to me. And so then I lived in it, and I had some vision of things that I wanted to do with some funding, like buy a ring, an engagement ring. And I sold it in 2021 to a family that moved to New Orleans from New Mexico. And so I share that on the start because hope was his vision of how he can vote. And he utilized that home purchase of a historic building, a shotgun home in the city of New Orleans, in his mind to move his life forward. My mom did the same. It was her first home. She bought it when she was at the age of 42. And then she passed it on to me, and I used it for the purpose for me to do the things that I want. Come on in. For the things that I wanted to do that was personal to me. And so as we think about what is the hope for the city of New Orleans for the next generation, we need to think about how do we be more present, how do we have those visions for them, and how we can allow them to get close to us to see the things we're working on. King Logan, who a lot of PRC folks in the room are very familiar with, he reached out to me last night. He was bummed that he couldn't be here, but he sent me a very, very, very long email of details about hope in the city of New Orleans. And I read it. And there was something that really stood out to me from what he shared. And I want to read it to you guys because it kind of falls into the lane of the things that we're talking about today. It said, hope, where vision, dreams, potential, aspiration, and expectation leap both into and out of new understandings, new truths, new learning, interesting and non-toxic conversations. Hope that gratifies the soul through listening to nature and listening to one another. Hope that gladdens the spirit from the joy of new and contagious enthusiasm. Hope that inspires the mind from new discovery and from the old familiar triumph and victory of cooperation. Contagious enthusiasm. That really stood out for me as I read what King was sharing with me. And so when I think of contagious enthusiasm, I think about my team. This woman right here could tell you that I am always on and I am ready. And when I see her in the way that she operates, I know that it's a contagious energy that we're giving off each other at school for the work we're doing for our boys. And so when we're having meetings, I told her today, well, last night I said, I'm bummed that we can't have any of the students here today. Because that's part of that hope of having them present to see it and understand what we're looking to do for them, as well as at some point, I want someone to say, I want Mr. Taylor's job. And so over the last 2 years, there's been 3 students who have come up to me and say, I want your job, I want to do what you do, right? And so one's at USC, another one's at Notre Dame, and another one's at LSU. In 20 to 25 years, those young men will be of the age to be the next generation of leaders. And so the contagious enthusiasm, it has to flow from us, right? And so when King sent that to me, I wrote it back and I said, this is powerful. Contagious enthusiasm is such a real thing. Our city needs more of this on a regular basis. Thanks for sharing. Know that we're filming this and we'll send you the recording since you can't read it. And so I wanted to kick that off and start us off with really thinking about the work that all of us are doing, right? So I have the pleasure of being with young men every day, and we obviously look at them as the hope of New Orleans and where will they go, what will they do. And this past class who graduated, 55% stayed in state, 45% went out of state. But all of them, we do check-ins. How's it going? What is happening? What can we support you with? And so all of that is tying back to home's calling me. Home is thinking about me. And even the ones that are here in New Orleans, they consider St. Aug their home. And as we continue to check on the young men and the people that are doing the work, that gives them hope that somebody is thinking about their future. And as we think about how do we unlock access and provide new ways and opportunities for them, we also have to be cognizant that they may decide not to live here. They may say, I can make much more money in other places, but how do we give them a different vision so the work can stand in front of the compensation, right? Everybody's not going to be a millionaire. Everybody's not going to be a billionaire, but everybody should have a vision and the contagious enthusiasm to do great work and groundbreaking work that others may not be thinking about. And so that brings me to 2 of my esteemed panelists that I've asked in the last 24 hours. I sprung it on both of them. Chris kind of volunteered himself after a board meeting on yesterday?
Oh, it was Wednesday.
On Wednesday. And I said, why not? Because they give 2 different perspectives, but they're both in the world of investment. And so I'm going to call Kelly Saulney up. Kelly is native New Orleanian, grew up in Gentilly, went to college, went to Xavier Prep, now St. Catherine Drexel Prep, graduated in '99, went on to Florida A&M University and received her bachelor's and MBA dual majors within Profounding program. And Kelly and I found ourselves living in New York City for kind of almost the exact same time. And when I moved home, I would check in, see what's going on, and all of a sudden, Kelly was like, I'm coming home. And as she made her way back to New Orleans, she had investments on her mind, investments into the city of New Orleans. And without me stealing her thunder, she created an organization called Homecoming. And I won't go into the details of it, but it has to do with investments. And I want Kelly to share with you all what Homecoming is, what's her passions, and how she's giving hope to the current generation, the next generation through the project that she's been building. So without further fail, Kelly Saulney.
good morning, everyone, and Austin, thank you for having me, and I'm happy to share. I thought this was going to be more of a panel, so I don't have like a formal speech prepared, but I'm happy to share a few things. So as Austin said, I am a daughter of New Orleans, and I wear that all over. And I was in New York for 11 years. I do believe New York has an expiration date. 11 years was mine. And so I happily moved back home. Homecoming, I'll get to homecoming in 1 second. I will say homecoming is what I moonlight in doing. I do, when I first moved back home, I was fortunate enough to join an organization, Camelback Ventures, which is an accelerator for entrepreneurs of color and women. Off the cusp of New York, I should also say that my first job out of college, which led to 10 and a half years, was with a beauty brand, Carol's Daughter. I started with Carol's Daughter when she was literally a startup, was part of the legacy team that built it, and we sold it. So 10 and a half of my 11 years in New York was with that company. I am a walking testimony of what happens when people get access to money. We sold the company to L'Oreal, which is the largest beauty company in the world. And that's when my expiration date, like I said. So when I came back home, I really just wanted to create, more Carol's Daughter. That was really, I didn't have any other like big plan. I just knew I loved being in an entrepreneurial kind of ecosystem, which led me to Camelback Ventures, which is, I was working with an incredible founder, Aaron Walker, who, really taught me how to fundraise, so forth and so on. And that led me to what I do now. I just launched with 3 other partners, a venture capital firm here based in New Orleans, Corridor Ventures. We are an early stage venture capital firm looking to infuse more VC money in the U.S. Southeast. So anything Louisiana East, DMV South is pretty much the area that we pretty much will invest in. So I wanted to just get that out the way, just to say, homecoming is great, but that's not my full time. That's not where I spend most of my time. But it does intersect in the sense of I love New Orleans and I want to be here. Much like Austin, I bought my family house 2 years ago. I am here. And what I was noticing, I've been home 6 years now, and what I've been noticing is 2 things. One, New Orleans is even different from when I left, because I moved away the year I graduated from Florida, and was also the year of Katrina. So when I left, and I didn't come back till 6 years ago. New Orleans is very different even from what I knew it to be pre-Katrina, because I wasn't here. I came home, I always say I came home for all the obligatory holidays, Mardi Gras, Jazz Fest, and so forth. But I hadn't lived here. And I have so many other friends who still love New Orleans. My best friends are my high school friends in true New Orleans fashion. And I have so many great friends who still love New Orleans, but don't feel that they can be here and thrive. And that's an issue for me. And over the 6 years, I ran a nonprofit since I've been here on the side through Xavier Prep. And it's really scary to me how we cannot retain talent in the city. Like it keeps me up at night at this point. And so I birthed Homecoming as a way to say, well, look, New Orleans people still love New Orleans, even though they can't be here. It doesn't negate the fact that New Orleans has produced some tremendous talent that other parts of the world are now essentially, reaping the benefits of. So how do we get them back for a weekend or a week or what have you, and marry them with local leaders and point them in a direction of organizations such as St. Paul, PRC, whatever it is, of what they should be investing in, that's doing the work of preserving our city and culture. So our provocative, or our problem statement, if you will, was the culture is not going to survive another generation of inequity. So we have to figure this out now. But to Danielle's point, I don't ever enter conversations around New Orleans deficit-based. I know what my city is. I know what my city can be. And so, in knowing the history as well as I do, when I got my homecoming team together, we were very much so aligned that New Orleans is the original influencer. We are ground zero. We are number one. Everything that this world has, in our minds at least, is because of New Orleans. So from there, we birthed the tagline, "You're welcome," which was kind of that was kind of like our ode back to the world to say, "You're welcome." And it's also kind of our promise to the future that New Orleans is going to lead again in everything from climate to racial equity, so forth and so on. That this was kind of be our solve, if you will, our solve statement. So that's kind of where we just had our inaugural homecoming 2 weeks ago, which was a huge success, to the point that I have people now, are the t-shirts for sale, or the hats for sale. So we're trying to figure all of that out, which is great. But the mission behind homecoming and You're Welcome, programming moving forward will be under You're Welcome, and homecoming will always be the culminating event, just like any other homecoming that we'll do at the end of the year. But it's really under this premise that we are the leaders, that the world doesn't move until we tell the world how to move. And so that's the attitude that we're going forward with, that it won't be deficit-based. It will always be aspirational in terms of what we do, and it'll look from past to future, and we will figure this out collaboratively together. So with the last homecoming we had the first homecoming we had 2 weeks ago, it was very intentional in terms of the room I curated. I tried to get, a little bit of everyone cross sectors. I purposely made it where I didn't have any panels. The idea was no one is more of an expert than the other as it relates to what it's going to take to move the city forward. That we're all students and teachers in this the same. And it's more about collaboration than one person should be a leader. So I'm happy to share more. That's, like I said, this is kind of fresh off the press, if you will, but I'm looking forward to the next year and, just building homecoming into a force that the city really can seek refuge in terms of where to seek vision for the city as well as leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Awesome. So, as I mentioned, from the board meeting on Wednesday, Chris decided to come and chat, and he found himself up here today on Friday. But in our conversation, I saw a very nice moment to highlight the work that he's been doing with his organization of architects. And so for about the last 14, 15 years, you guys have been in existence. I thought it was a great way to continue to describe pipeline building. And so while Kelly's on the investment side into the community, Chris and his organization that he's involved in is investing in the workforce development. And so Chris, come on up.
Thank you, Austin. And Kelly, that's hard to follow. It's amazing to learn about the stuff that you're doing.
Thank you.
Can you hear me all right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So my name is Chris Demrick, and I am here representing the National Organization of Minority Architects Project Pipeline Mentoring Program. So I'll start by saying a couple words about myself too. I grew up in Austin, Texas. So I have been here in New Orleans for 11 years, starting in 2012. I came to start as an undergrad at Tulane School of Architecture the week of Hurricane Isaac. So that was the 7th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. And I was in 6th grade when Katrina happened, so starting in middle school. And my early experiences in New Orleans were shaped a lot by the people who were displaced from New Orleans, who came and went to my middle school and then my high school. Austin talked about contagious enthusiasm. And one thing that stuck with me throughout that period, and especially when I was interested in coming to college in New Orleans, was the enthusiasm that people from New Orleans I knew had when I mentioned that. When I said, oh, I might be going to Tulane, people were very, very enthusiastic about, oh, I love New Orleans. I lived in New Orleans. Still very attached to this place. For me, coming to New Orleans was also in a period when I was starting to understand racial injustice in the world, in our society particularly, and my place as a white person doing professional work. I think I originally just wanted to be an architect and moved to New York and be famous like I thought all architects were. But I only ever did a summer in New York. I never made it that long. Partly because I was really tied back to here by the mentors that I'd had at the Tulane School of Architecture, by people who'd invested in me, and a lot of that investment happened through this organization, NOMA, Project Pipeline. That's not what NOMA was created to do, which I think is an interesting point. For those familiar with the architecture profession, and I'll say this and then move from a deficit to an assets-based framework too. The architectural profession on the license level is about 82% white, 2% black, and 0.5% black women. The percentages are a little higher of black representation at the below license level, at the levels of designers. But those are really shocking and appalling statistics, and they're largely unchanged for decades. The National Organization of Minority Architects was founded in 1971 by a group of black architects from around the country who were interested in representing their collective interests in not just improving those statistics, but also celebrating and continuing the knowledge of the rich history of black designers in the United States. So I'll start by talking about Project Pipeline as a national thing. Project Pipeline was started, I believe, in like 2007 in Cincinnati, Ohio, and then expanded over the next decade and a half to more than 25 camps today. These take place in cities all over the country. Most of them are in person, but over the pandemic, there was the opportunity some cities saw to create virtual camps. So this instruction is reaching thousands of kids in a variety of formats, but mostly as a summer camp. So our program here is a summer camp that lasts between 3 and 5 days. And then we do in-school mentoring as well, as many other camps do too. This is a selection of some of the other ones around the country. So our camps and our programs are a design justice program. So what does that mean? That is architecture, planning, other professions and fields in the built environment, which includes policy, includes development, landscape architecture, from an advocacy lens. And that is suggesting that professionals in these fields have an obligation to change the world in ways that benefit all people, but especially Black people and people of color who've been excluded from opportunities in these fields, and for whom many injustices in this world can be traced back to the ways the built environment is designed, the policy around the built environment, and the ways that those things are perpetuated through the current state of the built environment. So design justice is basically, it's a phrase we use very much to try and create this culture that we're not just going into these professions, we're not just building these professions to be in them, but to really change them. So the pipeline starts in middle school. We have camps and programs around the country that do various kinds of middle school outreach. Ours is really just, we go into schools for workshops. Then we have our whole summer camp, which I'll talk mostly about later. Our connections into pre-college programs this is a version of it that's tied specifically to Louisiana, but other states have similar things too. We connect students with pre-college programs at Tulane, LSU, and UL Lafayette. And there are student chapters of our organization at each of these 4 schools. So students have a self-organized group. It's kind of like a mini version of our statewide professional organization at each of these schools. We support them sometimes financially, sometimes with mentoring, and then once they graduate, they can become a part of our professional organization. So that's NOMA Louisiana. And we do this camp, we do professional development and mentorship, and then we really try to bring together people in an interdisciplinary community. That's in part because who all visit New York, there are hundreds of architects we can draw from to be in our organization. But because this is design justice work too, we need people coming from a variety of perspectives. So we have a lot of educators who are part of our community and a part of our programs. We have people in landscape architecture, stormwater management, engineering, public health, and other fields that also affect the built environment too. So back to that assets-based framework, and because of course this is the PRC, we got to talk about history a little bit. Going to make the connection into what we do now and how it's deeply rooted in the history of this place and the people who've lived here. So folks may be familiar with Dr. Tara Dudley and her work. Show of hands. Yeah, a couple folks. Dr. Dudley is a professor at UT Austin, and she writes about free people of color as not only architects, but also developers in 18th and 19th century New Orleans. So we all probably know the Dolios and the one of the houses that that family developed in the Marigny, which is here. One important thing about this particular slice of history, I think, is that it establishes that the work that Black people and people of color have been doing in the built environment has always been interdisciplinary. It was never just narrowly constrained to architecture, because what architects do is itself kind of limited by our clients, right? We have to be working with the people with the money, or be the people with the money, in order to really exert an agenda. And when that's a social justice oriented agenda, we need to have either ourselves in the rooms where power is happening, or be some of those people in the rooms as well. So by being developers all the way back then, the Dolios and many other families of color were establishing that precedent that many later generations could follow. So folks might also know, or not know, because this is sometimes a little bit less well known in New Orleans, the work of Ferdinand Lucien Rousseff. Show of hands, who knows Rousseff? Yeah, some folks. Rousseff was Louisiana's first Black licensed architect, gained licensure in the early 1930s. He's from a Seventh Ward Creole family that was very active in politics from Reconstruction through the era of Jim Crow. And he did a lot of work, especially for the Catholic Church, but then also some other projects, such as the Ashton Theater at Hollygrove, in association with Michael Dorsey. And Perkins and James, which has kind of gone down in history as the first Black architecture firm in the Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi tri-state region. Founded in the early 1970s by two graduates of the Southern University School of Architecture. Perkins and James did some kind of bold modernist work that later transitioned into postmodernism. The Treme Center is one really recognizable project of theirs. And Perkins and James mentored Mr. Lonnie Hewitt and Mr. James Washington, who themselves founded the Louisiana chapter of the National Organization of Minority Architects in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. So this is a nice piece of history. This is the development of some townhomes in Uptown, in which Hewitt Washington was the architect in the 1980s. And one of my favorite works of theirs personally is the Martin Luther King Jr. School and Library in the Lower Ninth Ward. They did a lot of work for the school board in the 1990s, and they really took postmodernism into a kind of deconstructed, you can see with this like metal lattice element. Yeah, they did some really cool expressive things with postmodern design. And I know as we get into the era of preserving postmodernism, and we know like what happened to so many, especially modernist New Orleans schools in the years after Katrina, we need to be proactive in understanding the role of this organization and other folks like us in preserving works like these, especially by architects like Hewitt Washington that aren't as recognized among the architectural community. So that takes us into the 2000s, especially in the years after Hurricane Katrina. There's a lot of energy around changing the built environment to be more just and equitable in New Orleans, and that is when our camp was created. It started in 2011 here in New Orleans, and I believe Mr. Raven Armand, who's here in the room, might be in this picture. This is the second year of our camp, and we are really excited that it's continued all the way up until year 11, which was last summer. We'll be doing it again next summer. It's a really great opportunity for not only us to connect as professionals and to keep our organization going, but primarily to serve the students, the high school students from around the city and the region who come to take part in our camp every year. So here's an example of some of the work that's produced. This is a model of a community sports and recreation center that was designed by some students in 2018's camp. As you can see, we're working with both the programming aspects that come out of architecture and development, but also some landscape elements. We have a lot of creativity around how materials are used. Students go through a process of learning about the forces that control the built environment, from architectural professionals to planning, real estate development, how neighborhoods and cities are developed, and then through an analysis of those processes, they determine what they want to develop in their neighborhoods, basically, and then this is one outcome of that prompt, which is how our camp works. Of course, in 2020 and 21, we shifted to a virtual camp, so that offered some new and interesting opportunities, especially to learn more about the circumstances that a lot of our students live in, because we did home visits to make sure they had the necessary supplies for camp. And then we invited them, rather than picking one site like we usually do, to pick a site in their own neighborhood. So also, thanks to the pandemic, we had the opportunity to add some programming because we wanted to see what we could do that kind of kept people outside, even if we couldn't come together for our whole in-person camp. And that birthed our field trip program. So field trips go to some really special places and allow our students to meet some really special people. Folks might be familiar with the TEP Center, Tate Etienne Prevost, which also recognizing, I believe this is the 63rd anniversary of New Orleans school desegregation, when Miss Leona Tate, Gail Etienne, Tessie Prevost, and Ruby Bridges courageously integrated New Orleans public schools for the first time since Reconstruction. This is Miss Leona Tate giving a tour to some of our students back in 2021. And she and the TEP Center and Ms. Tremaine Knight and Riley down there have been ongoing partners for our tours and visits to that really special development and preservation project in the Lower Ninth Ward. We've also continued to incorporate environmental education, in part because kids are already very excited to get outside and to see, to learn more about plants and the environment around us. This is Baquet Chapel and Pier, another big supporter of ours. They hosted a workshop where students got to reprogram the old Mercy Hospital in Mid-City back in the spring of this year. It was a really exciting time. Then we got to visit Piazza d'Italia and learn about this place. Piazza d'Italia was a really fun place to visit because we got to talk about the ways that that a project like this can express culture. In this case, the Italian Sicilian culture of New Orleans in this exciting public space, but also the ways that architects sometimes invisibly get to take part in it. Hewitt Washington was actually the associated architect for a 1990s renovation of Piazza d'Italia, but that's not really so known. So knowing that these firms, architects, participate in shaping the built environment in ways that are both visible and invisible, in ways that we may know about from the outset, or maybe takes more time to investigate and find, is part of what we're teaching our students. Our primary love and our primary activity is always going to be summer camp. This is a couple shots from this year's camp. We're learning how to play in communities. This is Brianna Booker, architect from Baton Rouge, who's one of our mentors. We are learning how to not only plan communities, but be critical of how communities are planned. The way this works is students are in groups. They will make a community on one of these boards, and then they'll have to switch, and then they'll analyze the community that another group created. And they will, in that way, become critical of, like, is this neighborhood missing a hospital? Does this neighborhood have enough housing for people who need to live here, as we are in the real built environment? And a couple of our mentors here in this picture includes Brian Bradshaw, who is here. Brian is the program coordinator of NOMA Louisiana Project Pipeline and designer at Co-Locate here in New Orleans. And at the end, students present, just as you would in architecture school or in a professional context, present their work and their teams. Brian, again, we give students diplomas and they graduate from our program. Then another part of this year's field trip was some office visits. We always like to introduce students to what it looks like to work in an architecture office. This was a really fun one, going to Mathis Briere. Going to some offices, you're just like pointing at computer screens, which is fun sometimes, but it was really cool to be able to go to one of like New Orleans' oldest and most storied architecture firms where they have blueprints from the 1920s. And the kids really appreciated that opportunity for like the tactile experience of how architecture used to be done. And finish out with our visit to Studio B, because as we're thinking about what it means to be not only architects, developers, I believe the phrase that Studio B uses to describe itself is creative alchemy, the process by which they developed this world-famous art gallery out of vacant warehouses in the Bywater. So we got to go and talk to people who are part of that collective about how it's done. And as we're always building skills, we do a really fun back-to-back sketching activity where one student has to face away from the art, and the other student facing the art has to describe what they're seeing to the one who's facing away. So I'll end on this because I think this is a great example of the kinds of communication skills that we are teaching, the kinds of skill building that we are bringing to these young people, is that there's nothing that you can do alone. This hard work of advocacy of transforming the built environment for justice and equity is something we have to do together, and we have to learn how to communicate and do that and work together effectively in order to do that. And I'll end with a shameless plug. Our program, of course, is a small nonprofit, and we love having support from people all around the city and the nation too. So if you want to learn a little bit more about it and learn how to support us, please scan this QR code. There's also one other thing I didn't put a slide in for, but we're having a mixer event this evening at the Free People of Color Museum on Esplanade Avenue. So if you are interested in coming out and learning more about us, please come talk to me after, and I can give you more details on that.
Awesome. Can we get a round of applause for that? This was great. This was great. So we are going to do some Q&A. We have about 5 minutes, maybe 10. About 10 minutes? All right. Raymond, Cornisha, do I have 10 minutes, or do I need to get to y'all to the meeting we had? Okay. All right. Raymond, I was looking for you, because if you weren't up there, it was going to be a problem. You're a lead architect, sir. Just so y'all know, we're working on a very big project right now with Traplin Pier on St. O's campus. This is our second project that we've done together, and this one we're in now is a $13 million project. So it's great to see Chris point out all of the mentorship that's happening in the architectural world. We're going to open up the Q&A. Danielle has given us 10, I just took 2. So we have 8 minutes of Q&A if you guys have any questions.
I have a question for Kelly. What recurring ideas did the first homecoming session yield from the out-of-state people from cross sections? What ideas did they have that were kind of like new ideas that you don't necessarily hear from people that are still here?
I wouldn't say necessarily, I didn't have a lot of expats this one. I did have some, not, like that's going to be a growing population, if you will, at homecoming. But I think the one thing that I found most surprising was, I feel like we're always together in New Orleans. It's like we convene all the time, second lines, what have you. But there's still this need of community. Like, the recurring thing was, I want to get to know the people in this room better, and like this idea of intentionality when we convene and so forth and so on. And it was just kind of like this epiphany moment where, like I said, as much as we're together, people still want community around the issues that they care about, or just, about the visions that they see that they want to see put forward for the city. And so that's something that we'll focus more on moving forward with programming. The other big thing that came out of it was this idea of really, I'm trying to think of the best way of saying this, how are you traveling from the past to future, this idea. And we tried to like infuse some things around Afrofuturism. So instead of like showing me all of this data around crime or what have you, like show me what the city would look like if every black man was employed. Show me what the city would look like if every child was mandated to learn an instrument. You know, we bought music classes. Like, show me what the city would look like then. So it was really this idea of just, again, kind of leading with hope. You know, this idea. And what I tell people all the time is, and this is something that really resonated at homecoming, was, you know, we have to understand the difference between pride and morale. And I think as New Orleanians, we have a lot of pride, but the barometer should really be around morale, because pride is really based on the past. But morale, anybody who's on a team will tell you that you want your team to have high morale, because that means that they're getting up and working for you because of what they think something positive is coming in the future. So for us, we kind of collectively decided that our definition of success as we evolved this would be around morale. And so I guess that's a little bit kind of a pragmatic way of looking at hope. But that's kind of, those are some of the big things that came out of it.
We have a 7 o'clock football game today against John Curry. This pride and morale as they go take us out today. Next question.
Alston, you as the leader of St. Aug are very intentional about how you curate your students' experience every day to grow them into future leaders through academic education, extracurriculars, athletics, and just the overall influence of the people that they are around and learning from every day. You as an individual are active on many boards and programs across the city. As a leader yourself in the city of New Orleans, what do you see as a vision for the future of the things that we need to work on collectively, or that can lift us all up? You're doing that, you know, on a scale with the school. How as a city can we improve?
You saw what Chris just did? That is like, if we could bottle that up of showing what everyone is doing and how folks are active, and there was a way to do that over a 365-day period to reach the masses of people, to get them motivated because they're seeing what others are doing, that would be ideal for me. It's probably not possible to be able to get a glimpse of what every single person who lives in this city is doing every day as passion points and passion projects, but how do we get a glimpse of all the great work that as individuals, as collective units, that we're doing to move the city forward from the lanes that we have? I think everybody wants to win. I don't think anybody wake up saying, I'm gonna lose today, I can't wait to lose. Doesn't even sound right? But how do you go into your place of work, or on your sofa, at your desk, while you're at home, and others are finding out about the work you're doing, and they are inspired to want to do more from whatever that they do. And then it comes to this point to where everybody meeting up together with a win. We've gotten involved in a number of areas in the city as a school, including in the Civil Rights Museum, right? Thanks to Ben, when we're inside of a meeting for the Louisiana Museum Foundation, he points out that this is launching very soon. I saw his interest in that temporary space of the museum, and it was contagious to me. And I said, set up a date, I want to go tomorrow, I want to go see it. I go into it, I see it, and I said, St. I was going to give support toward it. And we wrote a check to support support the museum and the operations. And Ben, in return, wrote a check to say, we're doubling down, we're gonna match you. And giving that support to the museum is not necessarily about the money, it's about showing up for something that is pivotal and important to the city of New Orleans, to the state of Louisiana, and how do we continue to do more things like that. There's a lot of schools that do good work in the city of New Orleans. They may not know how to publicize it and get that energy out there. My team is always willing to share how we do the work that we do, and we look to others to say, what are you guys doing that we're not doing that we can do more of? So I think it's how do you get a glimpse of all the good things that are happening in New Orleans? And if there was a company that showcased that in a way, I think it'd be great. Susan, then my wife.
I think your hand was up first.
You do such a good job, St. Aug does such an incredible job of creating opportunities for your students with universities all around the country. You have arrangements with prestigious universities with earmarked scholarships and opportunities for St. Aug students. How do we get them to come back? I mean, you said you do touch points with the students once they're gone. What does that look like? What are you hearing from them? Do they want to come back?
When people leave, they see how other people are living. And sometimes they say, oh my God, this is great. I didn't think this is possible. And a lot of times they decide to stay where they are. But I think this passion that we all carry for our city, it ultimately brings them back home. And I think most of the time, it's experiences that will help that individual. Like myself, I did not have any intent to come back to New Orleans when I moved away in 2003. It actually was yesterday, November 16th, 2003, 20 years ago. When I moved to New York, I didn't have any intention to come back, but the priests who founded St. Aug are based in Baltimore, Maryland. And I got an opportunity to go to headquarters, and I met our very first principal, Father Matthew J. O'Rourke. And at the time, he was 89. But he had all his faculties, right? And he knew literally to the day that he left St. Aug, back from when he started it to when he left in the 60s. And he shared that vision with me. And truth be told, it is the absolute reason of why I came back home twice to work at the school, was because I took his contagious enthusiasm and I ran with it. And so on my second stint coming home, I had this vision of what I learned from him. And then I said, let's continue the great work. And so I think our young people will have to live life, get experiences, and something has to be that connective tissue that's back in New Orleans that makes them say, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna involve my talents here, and I'm going to impact the city from this place. It doesn't happen overnight, it takes time, because I came back in 2008 and I called it a failure. I didn't do well at the school then. And then I came back a second time, and what I learned in 2008, I applied in a different way, and I've had more success. Sorry, Chris?
What Austin was saying just inspired me to think about something that we're doing in the Louisiana Project Pipeline program. Thank you. Which is that we are preparing these young people to be the experts in New Orleans built environment. For so many decades, it has been people like me who have come in from other places, been educated in some of the great institutions the city has, who then become the recognized experts about New Orleans built environment. So we are supporting these students from middle school on to become the next generation of experts in New Orleans built environment, which also has lessons for them if they choose to go other places. And their expertise from here will always be important to them, but also we want to prepare them for success so that they are looked to and they are brought back and they are well compensated and they are supported as professionals, as the people who have the agency to change this city and make it a more just, equitable, and well-preserved place. Sorry, I just look at all these pictures and that makes me think about, like, for us here, like the PRC, this does come back to the built environment so often, to the ways that that history is being preserved and protected and perpetuated through the work of architecture and preservation. And we want these specific students to be the people who are doing that and who are supported in doing that.
Now, let me give this mic to my wife before I get in trouble.
No need.
Got
My
me in
question was
trouble.
actually to Chris, I don't even need a mic, about, pipeline, so you just explained that. I guess my other question would be about how do you get involved? I'm hearing you speak, I had no idea that your organization exists. Although I have two sorority sisters who I pledged with at LSU. The first one, Nicole Hilton, who's based in Atlanta now, was the first Black woman to graduate her architecture program at LSU, and she's been recognized for that. But many people have no idea who she is, and she's always thinking about ways, how can I come back to Louisiana and support? And then the other was one of the first Black women to graduate out of LSU's landscape architecture program, and she actually works for New Orleans Parks, right? And so she's like right here and very, not visible in that light. And so I'm thinking, like, they should know about this if they don't, and how do you get involved?
Thank you. Great question. And thank you for raising that too. I've heard Nicole Hilton's name, but only because I work with someone who also is Black and went to the LSU School of Architecture. I think first I'll answer your question directly. Our Project Pipeline program is actually one of our best ways to get people involved because the ask is very low at the beginning. It's, can you come take part in a one-day workshop? Can you help lead a tour of your office or maybe a work site that your company is doing? Can you support us financially, of course, is an easy thing. But we really care about the relationships as much as the funds too. We want to bring these young people into the opportunities that every person in this room has access to. And so if you have any ideas about something you might have access to that you think might make a good tour or something you'd like to talk to these young people about, please come and talk to me, and I'd love to help make that happen. Of course, in late July every year, we have the summer camp, and we love to have people come out for any amount of time, whether it's a couple hours on one day or the whole 4 days. Mentoring in the summer camp is a great way to begin those kind of relationships and to get to know the other mentors, because we really are a community of mentors. But yeah, I'll say after that, one of the real challenges of kind of that intergenerational relationships is because so many people who are part of our organization now are people who came from elsewhere, were particularly educated at Tulane. And it's taken us a lot of time and I think intention to have to build those relationships to the people who are really like the founders of so many of these professional spaces. And because some of those people leave too. But we want to ensure that they have a connection point coming back here. We're starting in the past couple of years new traditions like the mixer that we're doing this evening to give people the opportunity. People who may not live here but may be back here, we do it the weekend before Thanksgiving because we also want to give people like a homecoming sense, perhaps. Like we intentionally do it this weekend so that people who don't live here who are back for Thanksgiving may be able to come and attend. So I guess we've started to take the steps that we need to take to make some more of those connections, but it'll be a continual process to keep doing.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. This was great. I want to bring Danielle up to close us out. And before I pass the mic, I want to make sure that I say it again. This is a members organization. We need you to become a member. Get involved. There's a lot of great work happening at PRC. And as Danielle mentioned, I'll be board president next year. So if you don't sign up today, I'm coming after you next year. All right? All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much to our esteemed speakers. That was absolutely wonderful, really inspiring. There's a lot of hope for our future as a city, and we will continue to bring some of that good news through this series. So we hope that you'll continue to come out in 2024 for these talks, because I don't know about y'all, but it's like vitamins. I need that that infusion of good news and inspiration every now and then. Thank you for coming. We hope to see you on our holiday home tour, December 9th and 10th. Buy your tickets if you haven't already. And thank you so much for your support. Have a wonderful Friday.